Keep Up. I'm your host, Cynthia Daly. Thursday, November 13th, 2025. I'm in my Cape Elizabeth studio, and joining me today is a very special guest, Leyland Streiff, the lead petitioner for Protect Girls Sports in Maine. Welcome to the show, Leyland.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here. This is great.
Well, I'm happy to have you on the show. I collected some signatures towards the effort that you are one of the founders of. So why don't we start the program by just telling us, who are you, Leyland Streiff, and why do you care so much about protecting girls' sports in Maine?
Sure. I mean, I think most people do, and I think most parents do, especially. So, yeah, Leyland Streiff. Relatively newer resident to Maine. I moved up here from the New York, New Jersey area just under 2 years ago. Fell in love with Maine a long time ago. Been coming up here, bought a home up here, moved up here. And, love it. Absolutely love it. Why do I care about protecting girls' sports in Maine? I think I care about protecting them at large, not just in this state, but we got to start here. And I think we can create a movement where other states are going to follow. There's 3 or 4 other states actually doing exactly what we are doing right now on the same timeline in other states, doing ballot referendum initiatives. And the reason I care is because I'm a dad. I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 boys and I've got a girl. And I've got a girl who's getting to an age of 1 where, these things are becoming much more sort of prevalent in her own personal life as well as in school. But secondly, is also in athletics. So, this is something that I've seen has become more prevalent on the national stage. I think that in general, I've probably a lot of people where a few years ago you read about and you're like, man, that's some weird fringe thing that's a problem somewhere else. And not really until you start seeing it arrive in your own school and your own community and affecting your own kids that you're like, wait a second, this really is something. And, my role as a dad is one to make sure that I'm, fighting for my kids and fighting for common sense. And this has been an issue that, I and about 8,000 other dads have banded together about over this past year saying, hey, enough's enough. This isn't hard stuff. This is simple stuff. Males are with males and females are with females. And that's the right thing for our kids competitively, but also from a safety perspective. So probably more than that, but yeah.
In Maine, the kind of the kernel of the issue is that we have adopted gender identity into our Human Rights Act, which essentially allows for any boy or any man to identify as a girl and therefore have access to female spaces. And in the case of sports, access to sports teams. And we have, as many people know, have had, stories in the national news about boys playing on girls' teams and winning state championships. So that's the sort of problem that you're focusing your attention on. And you are the lead petitioner in a citizens referendum initiative, which under the Maine Constitution, we can, as citizens, collect signatures to get a law on the books. And you've started this effort. This isn't your first dance, right, with politics. You've been somewhat active. I saw that you've given some testimony at the legislature and that sort of thing. Tell me a little bit about the campaign itself. How did it come to be that you are a lead petitioner in a referendum effort? Yeah,
sure. I mean, probably an asterisk though as well, or a clarification at least on what you just said. I would say it very much is my first dance with politics. Some of my testimony, to your point, were on previous legislation making its way through the state. You can either go in person or you can submit testimony online. So some of that has just been, me as a citizen responding to some of that testimony. But as I say to a lot of people, I'm ignorant on a lot of things, and politics would be one of them. I don't, I'm not somebody that's some political operative. I don't know the first thing about political schemes and strategies. All I know is, I see an issue, and it's been one that I've been blessed to be able to, have an opportunity to get involved in. So I'm learning a lot as we go. You probably know a lot more about it than I do, and you could probably teach me a lot of stuff. And I think my route to getting here and how I'm helping us all get through has been probably much more simplistic and one that's, like I've said, just really based off of common sense, seeing a problem and saying, hey, is there something that we can do about it? The road to getting here, is one that's sort of transpired over the past year or so. Since I got here in the past year or so, I've gotten in touch with several people that run awesome groups like the Maine Education Initiative or Parental Rights in Education. through them have just sort of connected in to, them and sort of advocates of those causes. Through that, met other dads that were feeling the same way that I did, that specifically this issue was one that was a bit of an existential threat for our daughters. And with that, helped sort of organize us, from a jumping off standpoint early in the spring or late winter. I don't know, up here, it seems like all of those become one thing, of having a moment where we really sort of like came out as dads and sort of launched having a voice and doing something about this. So back in early April, we had a gathering at the steps of the state capitol. Chloe Cole came and spoke and gave a little bit of perspective as well, specifically as it relates to sports. There was like a great sort of starting point and rallying point for us. That went hand in hand with about 8,000 petitions that were sent to the MPA. There was, a moment back then where, a lot of dads and a lot of parents just said, hey, like, this is like kind of crazy. And like, MPA, can you step in and maybe
MPA being the Maine Principals Association?
The Maine Principals Association, saying, hey, you're sort of like the governing body here when it comes to the policies of all of our individual districts. Title IX, is something from an executive order standpoint that we've been told like needs to happen across the state. We as dads feel like, hey, that seems to make a lot of sense. Why aren't we doing something about it? Generated 8,000 signatures. We had a bit of a celebratory event for that up in Augusta, like I talked about. One, to sort of call other people to action, but really hold the MPA a little bit, their feet to the fire. And fast forward then over the summer, a lot of like bureaucratic inaction. I mean, the MPA didn't do anything. The legislature refused to be able to push anything forward that would really have sort of stress test the issue and come up with some sort of solution. So at the end of the summer, a bunch of us dads and advocates that cared said, like, why don't we take this into our own hands? I think we're tired of sort of being quiet about it. And, we know that the majority of people agree with us. So why don't we go forward and do something about it and start a citizens initiative that is a ballot referendum where we across the state can actually vote on this. And I think there's like a couple of things about it that I guess really drew me to this being the next way in which the cause unfolded. And I think there's a few things with it. One is, as you probably know, school districts are changing policies right now on an individual basis, which I think is great. Like, citizens are showing up, they're voting in their own district, and they're coming up with policies that they think make sense to them on either side of the issue. That's awesome. I do think that even in some ways, while that's great, also further complicates the issue. If we don't have one point of view across the state and kids are feeling a little bit stuck in between, and then you look at school districts where one is like, well, here's where we stand on the issue, and then you're playing a different district that stands on a different side of the issue. Like, we're kind of actually increasingly complicating the entire problem. So we should have one point of view. And there's a lot of talk these days, especially in the current political environment. And again, I don't want anything to do with politics, but I do believe that like democracy is really important to us. And we talk a lot about that right now. And I look at this and look at, we've got legislatures in Maine and in DC, and I don't know if any of us ever really know what they're doing. And it doesn't really feel like they're representing all of the individual best interests of their constituents. So like, what more of an awesome democratic process than saying like, you know what, like, you could agree with me, you could disagree with me. Awesome on both sides. Like, I think that's what makes this so great, is that we all get to vote. Like, as a state, we're going to get to vote and decide on this together, which is
that's true. That's true. And I appreciate the fact that you want to kind of keep it out of the political binary of Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. But unfortunately, it tends to happen that these things do get sort of spliced and diced and end up being a red or a blue issue. You do have the wind at your backs in the sense that the polling shows that a majority of people do support keeping boys out of girls' sports.
Right.
The proposed law has two components. One is to separate athletic teams by biological sex, but also to require public schools to have private spaces like bathrooms and locker rooms on the basis of biological sex. And I'm just wondering, if do you think you're going to be able to keep this referendum question sort of unattached to either of the political extremes. And I'm thinking like on the left, we've got the Hamas sympathizing, gender warriors. And on the right, we have like the Groyper, Nick Fuentes, like
There's crazy
out of
people
it.
everywhere. Like,
do you see this effort as somehow maintaining sort of the middle space in American politics? It seems almost impossible.
I think it's a good point. And I think that there's probably nuance to how I want to answer that. From the perspective of the ballot committee and those that are running it, this is not a political issue. So if you've looked at the Maine Girl Dad site and shoot, I didn't bring any of the t-shirts into the room with me, or I'd hold one up for you. I'll send you a picture of it if you want to flash it on screen. But there's the language that we constantly use as Maine Girl Dads. And the reason that we wanted to go about this is that our perspective is based in common sense and is paternal, not political. We don't care about politics. So if you see the way that we've been going about this campaign is, I don't think you've been seeing me campaign with anyone on the Republican side or on the Democratic side. Anyone that wants to come join us, we're here for. Any side of the party, anyone that votes with us, anyone that signs the petition, I'm on the same side as you. Now, that's exactly how we plan to run all of this. And that's how we see the issue. This is not a political issue. We understand that like, ultimately it's going to be a byproduct of like political means. But in its core, these are parents coming together saying, man, this is like really simple. Males with males, females with females. And we are going to stay the course on that. Now, the nuance to that obviously is I can't control media and I can't control what everyone else wants to say about this. As you can even see of like the limited press that has started to pick this up, every headline is, stripping people of their rights. Everything is
Right.
highly biased. It's all anti-trans, which, again, I'm not anti-anybody. This bill is not anti-anybody. And we can get into some of the specifics about that, but everything is obviously going to be skewed that way. I don't want to, get into, the trenches fighting out on some sort of like cultural political problem that is being propagated through media. I understand that's going to go on and I understand that, but like, that's out of my control. All I can control is what I have to say and what I believe and what all of us believe. And we're going to be sticking to that. And we're not looking to get into some political, cultural dogfight. This is, to us, much simpler than that.
Now, Leyland, you have a somewhat famous brother, at least according to the news reports. Your brother, Justin, is a CEO, I believe, of
Close. You got one letter off. COO.
Oh, COO. Okay. Chief Operating Officer for Turning Point USA. Is that going to influence your campaign to protect girls' sports in Maine at all, do you think?
We'll see. I hope so. I mean, he's my brother, and Turning Point, regardless of him being my brother, is the largest, most effective grassroots organization in the country. So I would be, moronic if I wasn't going to try to like get them involved and get them, to help us, not only over the next month or two as we're collecting signatures, but obviously it's sort of the campaign to go forward. So I think, we've got some conversations in the works, probably some stuff that you'll hear about in the next couple of weeks, but sort of long-term to be seen. I hope so, though.
Now, Larry Lockman is a Republican activist, former legislator, who penned a piece in the Maine Wire recently criticizing your petition, not for what it's trying to do, but the methodology, right. Because according to former Representative Lochner, you're kind of diluting the conservative base by almost, in his view, repeating the mistakes that the advocates for voter ID made, which is putting a question on the ballot instead of using your resources to elect conservatives to positions in power so that they can vote like big picture. What do you say to that? That, we had question 1 on the ballot, voter ID, that was broadly supported by Maine people. It ended up being a red-blue issue. Tons of money came in from out of state, including Democratic, backed organizations, and it was the question went down in flames. Right. So, do you worry that Larry Lockman's point might have some merit, that you might be draining or somehow diluting the power that conservatives have around this issue by having a question as opposed to trying to elect people?
Look. Fair point. Everyone gets an opinion. That's totally great that he's got an opinion. I think my first perspective when I read that was Larry needs a hug. I feel like Larry's been hurt sometime before, and he needs to know it's going to be okay. I think that, like, you know, when I read that, I understand where he's coming from. Like, perspective makes total sense, but his perspective is obviously coming from a very political place. You know, he's been in political positions. It seems like he's been writing about politics for a while. So, you know, he knows more about that than I do. Scheming and strategizing when it comes to politics, I wouldn't know the first thing about it, and it's something I honestly just don't care to know about. I think what I would say back to him is, this isn't a political activism journey that we're on here. I understand that adjacent, there are politics at play, and that this will ultimately be enacted through politics. I understand that politicians in general may stand on one side of the issue or not, but honestly, that's sort of not my concern. What is my concern is that those same politicians on both sides of the aisle have not gotten done things that we as Mainers, and not only as Mainers, across the entire country see as common sense. This is an 80-20 issue at large, not Republican, not Democrat. Like, you take the whole population, 80% of us agree that, like, hey man, like, baby dudes should be with dudes and girls should be with girls. Like, not complicated. And the fact that we haven't been able to figure that out nationally, although I guess we tried to figure it out nationally, but enact it across all of our different states and right here home in Maine, like, yeah, I mean, I will leave it to Larry as to whether or not that is now doing a disservice to the desire he has to elect Republicans next November. Don't know. Larry probably knows better than me, but I would say they haven't done what they were supposed to do on either side of the aisle. So yeah, like, we're showing up as people. And sorry, the last thing that I would say is that, again, like, this is from an outsider's perspective, something like voter ID, like, voting laws in general, like, at least from reading the media, I could understand is very much like a right-left thing. Like, people have been for a long time on one side of that issue. This issue is something that unites, I think, every parent and every parent of an athlete, especially. This isn't something that has, like, long-term or long-standing politics behind it in the same way, in my perspective. And it's probably limited and wrong, but well,
I think the playing the devil's advocate, the left has attached gender identity to the movement for civil rights for other groups of people, gay, lesbian, and so many people supported gay marriage because they recognize that the government blessing of a contract of two people to care for each other is perfectly fine, and they support that. But I agree with you that this issue is, gender identity is an existential threat to the female sex. I mean, our rights, our dignity, our safety are all at risk if gender identity and gender ideology rules the day. And I left the Democratic Party over this issue because the party, continues to fight for gender identity to be enshrined in the Maine Constitution, which would forever make it impossible for girls' sports to remain for girls. So you have the challenge of going up against this narrative that somehow protecting girls is discriminating against transgender people. And for one, I don't think there's such a thing as trans kids. I just reject that. But even if they're kids with gender dysphoria. Doesn't your legislation provide for accommodations for kids 100%. Who truly have an issue, have a medical problem?
100%. Medical and mental is 100% continue to be covered under the same federal laws of the Americans with Disabilities Act. They get the same protections that they have always had. So there are exclusions just like they have always had, and that is true. The other thing that I think is really true is that there's this misconception that we're changing the Maine Human Rights Act. It's not. If you read the legislation, this acts in harmony and unison with the Maine Human Rights Act and does not discriminate anybody at all. All this does is help unify that document with federal Title IX and ensure that someone is actually not going to be discriminated based off of their sex, which is exactly what is happening right now. So I do agree with you that, like, largely the left has attached gender identity to a cultural issue that has become a political issue, and that is one that we can't avoid. It is one that is fueling this problem. But I think the way that we are trying to go about this is in a way that nobody is discriminated against. We don't talk about gender identity. This says nothing about trans. This has nothing to do with that. All this says is that sex is important, sex is distinct, And sex is a characteristic that cannot be discriminated against. And this was the original intent of Title IX, and one that needs to continue forward for our kids. Under this, everybody gets to play sports, male, female, and co-ed. There is not any opportunity. Everyone keeps saying we're stripping rights and you're banning a kid from playing sports. It's not happening. Literally every single person can continue to play sports under this bill.
I think that the good thing about the bill is that it identifies, sex as a person's biological status as male or female recorded at birth on the person's original birth certificate. It's as opposed to getting away from this language, this gender ideology language about sex being assigned at birth, which is, I just think preposterous. I mean, so yeah. I think it's fair and it's simple. As you said, what's not simple is the Secretary of State's summary and then like fiscal analysis. Were you surprised when the ballot question came out?
Her summary, honestly, I thought the name of the bill that she assigned to it and the summary, I thought were pretty great, like pretty spot on. The financial summary is, I think, relatively funny. The biggest part being that there would be a unknown amount of increased cost and cost burden put onto schools for enforcing this.
I know.
I can't help but laugh at that because I'm like, wait a second. Like, how much money did it cost us to enforce this for the last 50 years? Like, it was only 5 seconds ago that we said, like, this is a big problem and it's so complicated and how are we ever going to figure it out? Like, I'm so confused by their, idea that we need to hire lawyers and that we need to potentially hire people at schools that are going to enforce this. They're going to do exactly what they always did. They check the birth certificate when you register somebody with public school, and it's as simple as that. Like, it's not complicated. This has nothing to do with your gender identity. It has nothing to do with how you present. There's no right way to be a boy or a girl. Awesome. Like, look and feel and do whatever you want to do. Like, cool. Like, no problem with that. All this is saying is that sex matters. Sex is recorded at your birth because it's biological. It's not a social construct, which is what we've been saying gender identity is. But I agree with you that, like, and I might be confused. Maybe you've got a better explanation from this. Where I've sort of lost track of it all, because I'm all about, like, hey, we should be more inclusive. I think that's great. I think people should look and present and feel any way they want to. I think that's cool too. I got no problem with that. But we went from saying gender identity is a social construct of a way that you sort of appear and feel and perform in the world. And sex is different. Sex is biological. But now when it comes to sports and locker rooms and bathrooms, we're actually saying, no, like same thing, same exact thing. But we said they were up. We said they were different. We said one is a performative nature in society and the other one is a biology, and that we might find people that feel like those two things don't meet correctly. Okay, not challenging that. Like, that's totally okay. That has nothing to do with the proposed legislation. All the proposed legislation is doing is saying, hey, cool, but like, we did say sex was distinct and sex mattered, and like, that's mattered for a reason, especially when it comes to sports categories. Why do we recognize that why did we recognize for 50 years they need to be sex-based categories? And why do we still recognize today that there needs to be categories based on age? Why don't we have 8-year-olds playing against 14-year-olds? That it needs to be based on skill. There's a reason there's a freshman team and a JV team and a varsity team. Like, sex matters just as much in someone's ability to compete. Like, this isn't complicated, and we've really like gotten our brains in a pretzel here.
I know. Well, and just briefly on the fiscal note, what's interesting is when the radical left, I think, passed gender identity into the Human Rights Act in Maine, there was zero fiscal note. The Human Rights Commission didn't anticipate any costs at that time, even though it was totally like changing the surface of the earth.
I'm sure there's been significant costs associated with that over the past 20 years.
Absolutely. Yes, there's been so much litigation. We're fighting for some of the basic sex-based rights that women and girls have been fighting for since the beginning of time. I mean, I just can't believe that here we are in the 21st century and I'm defending the reality of the female sex.
I had
dads.
These like crazy on election day when we were out there and we were getting petitions signed. I think a couple things hit me. Like, one is like the absolute relief of so many people that were walking up from both sides of the political aisle. They were like, the second you told them what this thing was called, they were like, give me that right now, and wanted to sign it. I would say it was easily over 70%. And I was doing that in Brunswick, where I think that the voting makeup here is probably different even than other parts of the state. Lots of relief, lots of girls specifically, high school and college age, coming up and saying, thank you so much about all of this. And just like, like so relieved and excited that somebody was standing up and doing it. And then beyond that, so many people shaking our hands, just saying like, appreciate that you're out here, like appreciate that you're actually standing up for this issue, because it does put us like people want to say mean things. Like just the fact that we're willing to stand up here and talk about common sense stuff. I'm not talking badly about anybody. I believe that I actually have a really inclusive and compassionate point of view on this, but the things that people want to say about me now are really negative. But like, people recognize that we need more people to be able to stand up and say something about it, because maybe in turn, they're going to be able to do it as well. And so the last thing I think that like really, it like struck me by the nighttime when I was still signing petitions that day, I was like, how crazy. We're like grown adults that we're standing outside signing pieces of paper that say we believe a male is a male and a female is a female, and like there's some distinction between the two. Like we're signing pieces of paper that say this. It's like crazy.
Yeah. Well, I was at the polls in Baldwin, Maine on election day, and
Awesome.
like you, I had an overwhelmingly positive response. Just very, very few people did not want to sign. When I was at the Wyndham Craft Fair on Saturday collecting signatures, again, for the most part, overwhelming support. However, there was one woman who was like hysterical, screaming at me, saying that, repeating the myth that there are only 2 transgender athletes in the whole state, and that transgender girls are in fact girls. So, you're going to be bumping up against some people who have these beliefs.
That part too. Like, I think that, first of all, to your point, that is a myth. It's much more wide than that. I had a girl come up to me that goes to Chevrolet, and she's on the lacrosse team. She told me they've lost 2 games so far this year, both of them to teams that had a male playing on the other team. So like, this is real. This is happening. The other thing is, like, just by even saying that, what I find strange is you are recognizing definitionally by the question that there's a problem. Like you're telling me that there's a problem. Or the only thing you're telling me in asking that question is the threshold. It hasn't reached whatever threshold you have to do something about it, which that's your own problem. But you have recognized to me that it's an issue. So for me, 1 is too many, but it is a lot more than 1. Like this is much more widespread than that. So, you're recognizing it's a problem by even asking that question.
Now, how are you doing with the collection effort? We heard in the news that you had an overwhelming first day, 53,000 signatures collected. Do you have any updates?
I think I'm waiting for an update today. I just talked to somebody about an hour before we got on, and our belief is that by the end of day today, we'll be over 60,000. As you know, the threshold is 68. There's a margin of error, obviously, that we need to accommodate. So we're shooting for over 100, and our belief is we will not only have that 100,000, but also have it all having checked by all of the town administrators before Christmas.
And what is the deadline? If you want to get this question on the ballot for November of 2026, which will be a huge year in Maine politics, because we're going to be electing a new governor, the U.S. Senate race, majorities in the House are, nip and tuck. This would really, I think, help define a lot of candidates where they stand on the issue. And so what do you have to do to get it in November?
Yep, we have to cross the threshold by February. So
by February.
Non-issue. Like these will have been submitted by the end of December is our plan. Latest early January. So we are well on our way to crossing the threshold and then going beyond it to our goal. So yes, we have to hit it by February. If we hit it by February, then it will officially be on the ballot next year. Obviously, we have to go through then, the Secretary of State doing their writing of the question and everything. So we'll have to deal with all of that when we get to it. But that's the current date that we got to get to is February. And I agree with you. It's going to be interesting to see, because again, like from our perspective, this is not a hard political line issue. This is like a unifying issue for most parents. So I am very interested to see politically how it plays out next year, because I would be surprised if this is just a right or left issue when it comes to the candidates next year.
I worry because as we saw in question 1 recently around voter ID, even though the thrust of the question was about voter ID, what the opponents to the question did was put an emphasis and a spotlight on what the proposed legislation would do to absentee voting. And in this instance, I worry that it's going to be framed as an attack on transgender people and an attack on LBGTQIA plus and civil rights and all that. And so much of it will depend on fundraising and who has, the message. And these nonprofits that support, the liberal side of the Democratic Party are very well funded. Are you worried about your funding? How are you going to get money?
Not worried about the funding. I think we've got, people across Maine and beyond that really care. So this is also something that is happening nationally. There are, I think, 4 other states doing the exact same thing that we are right now. So this is.
What other states do you know?
Oh man, the one that I remember off the top of my head is Colorado.
Okay.
I know they are doing it as well. So there are 3 others. I was just told about them this morning, and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting it. But yeah, I believe there's 4 other states in addition to us that are doing the same thing on the same timeline. So, but I'm not going to be able to control, obviously, what a lot of the media says. We're going to keep showing up. We're going to keep saying what we have to say. I think that the other thing with this is people aren't stupid. Like people are able to see through, I think, some of the headlines on this. And the truth is, if you even read the act right now, which has already gone through the Secretary of State and come back with their title to it, as well as, their updates on it, It is very simple. There is nothing, no one discriminated against in it. It says nothing about gender identity. It says nothing about trans, because it's not about those things. It's solely about enforcing sex designation, male, female, and co-ed. And so what I've seen is that when they write this, they're going to write it derivatively off of the language that we already have in the summary that she has. The summary is great. The headline is great. Most people only need to hear the headline: an act to designate school sports participation and facilities by sex. If I hear nothing else, I know whether or not I agree with that issue. And I think I wonder if you saw that on Election Day as well. The only things I said to people was, do you want to help protect girls' sports in Maine? With our ballot initiative, which is proposing an act to designate school sports participation and facilities by sex. Some people wanted to read more. The overwhelming majority, the second you said that to them, were like, give me that right now. I've been looking for that. Like,
yeah.
So again, like, I'm sure, the Secretary of State is going to do what the Secretary of State does, and we're going to have to deal with all of that next year. The media, from a left-wing perspective, is obviously going to take it to places that we all know that they're going to take it. But I think Mainers are a little bit smarter than that. I think that we can see past it. And when we see what this bill actually is, people agree.
Well, the bill, I'm sure, can be found at the Secretary of State's office, the petition language. And Leyland Streiff, before I let you go, if listeners want more information, want to get involved, want to support your effort to protect girls' sports in Maine, how do they do it?
I think a couple of ways. Obviously, we got a website and stuff, and I'll tell you about that. But I would say the first thing, honestly, is like sharing your point of view. I think that is the largest part of the issue. The things that I'm saying, I'm going to be honest, I was scared to say this stuff 6 months ago. I was scared to say this stuff a year ago. And I think most people have felt that way. But if I'm going to speak up, someone else is going to speak up. And I'm not only going to say it to my friend that I know agrees with me, but maybe I have a little bit of a hard conversation with someone that I know doesn't agree with me, which I had awesome conversations like that at the polls on Tuesday, where we found common ground. Have conversations like that, destigmatize this as an issue, so that we can actually have real conversation, not only with people that agree with us or behind closed doors, but out in public with people that don't agree with us. Because this is like, it's okay if we disagree, but like, we should be able to disagree agreeably. And that's only going to happen if we're able to speak up. So get a voice and be confident about it and go out there and talk about it. You're not the only person doing it. Beyond that, we've got a website, protectgirlsportsandmaine.com. If you could go there's a bunch of different ways to get involved. Obviously, you could donate. All this costs money as we run the campaign and print petitions and all of that. Second is that you could volunteer. We do need volunteers. We need petitioners. But, as we go forward through our campaign, even after we get this officially on the ballot, there's a lot to do over the next year. So that would be great if you want to go and sign up, and you can, stay aware of what we're doing. But we'll also connect you with people across the state that have volunteer opportunities to get out there and help get signatures and just help us get over the finish line.
There was, when I was initially signed up to volunteer on Election Day to collect signatures, at the last minute, there was an email saying that staff was hired to do kind of professional signature gathering.
Yeah.
And I think some people were a little upset about that.
Yeah, totally.
Can you tell me about that decision and who's running the campaign and calling the shots?
Well, I mean, I'm the lead petitioner, so stuff ultimately is going to bubble up through me. I'm working with other people. You can, look on the Secretary of State's website, and you can see, the other principles that we have in the ballot question committee, but there's a bunch of us that are working together. The truth is, paid petitioners are able to work at a velocity that a lot of regular people, like I'm showing up and I haven't done that before, and I'm trying to get people to sign the petition. I'm just not going to get as many as someone that is coming in and they know how to do this. They're aligned to the cause, but they also they know how to come in and do it. So we had a very limited amount of them, but we put them at the places that we knew were going to be the highest volume of people going through. And that displaced some people. It displaced me. I was going to show up here in Brunswick, and we had, somebody show up that was doing that instead of me. So I went other places, and then I ended up finding my way back to Brunswick later on in the day and kind of stood there with him and helped him out. So it's just a reality of petitioning. There were some people that were like, oh man, I really wanted to help. A couple of those went to other places, and a couple, we're just looking to find ways for them to get involved going forward. So yeah, probably wasn't the smoothest. I know there were a couple places, especially in Cumberland County, where we're like, hey, thank you, but we've got it taken care of for the day. And, really appreciate the people that raised their hands to be able to do it. And sorry, that probably created a little bit of friction for people. But I think at the end of the day, everyone, regardless, at least the way that I looked at it, is that sucks. I kind of wanted to be out there, but job number one for me is are we getting the signatures, and are we progressing the voices of what Maine wants to get this thing on the ballot? And if we looked at that as objective one, we had to make the call to be able to do that and be able to place people we would know we're going to get the most amount of stuff at the highest volume places.
Well, Leyland Streiff, I'm happy that you were able to join us today. I hope you can jump on the show again as the campaign unfolds. Is there any last words you'd like to share with the audience before I let you go?
I don't think, the only thing I'd like to just sort of reinforce about it is something I think we've talked a lot about here, but, is a bummer that the media continues to sort of twist and get the wrong way. Anyone that that is on the side of this is about protecting our girls. This is super common sense. It's not political. And this is something at the end of the day that discriminates nobody. The Secretary of State's own language, if you go online and you read our bill, which you can read it from the Secretary of State website, or go to our website, and we've posted all of the language for the act as well, works in harmony with the Maine Human Rights Act. It doesn't change it. Nobody's being discriminated against. Gender identity is not being removed for the Maine Human Rights Act. All this does is harmonize it with federal Title IX and ensure that no one is discriminated based off of their sex, which is what's happening right now. So this allows for everybody to play, male, female, and co-ed. If a girl wants to play football and there's not a girls' football team, play football. Awesome. The way that it's always been. So, that is something I just want to make sure people walk away with. No one is being discriminated against. I would not want to be part of anything where I felt like somebody was being discriminated. It's not me. I think that this is being done in the right way where everybody gets to be part of sports.
Well, thanks again. And I hope to have you back on the show soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it, Cynthia.
Take care.
All right. Bye.